All right, before I start, how many SZA fans do I have in here? Just raise your hands. All right. So, the reason I say this is because in the song Kill Bill, I have a lyric up here. I got me a therapist to tell me there's no other men. I don't want none, I just want you. If I can't have you, no one will. So when you hear this lyric, does it sound improper or incorrect to you? Especially the I got me a therapist and I don't want none. These are two examples of African American vernacular English. I'm gonna go into some terms first, which are, again, African American vernacular English, which is the type of English spoken mostly by black people in the United States, as well as General American English or Standard American English. The Black English, which I'll also call Black English or African American English, as well as it's been referred to as Ebonics in the past, although that term's a little outdated now, and talk about the contrast between the two. So, starting with the history of AAVE, there's two main theories about how it originated. The first theory is creolization, which is when multiple languages kind of mix together to form a new separate language. Two very large examples spoken in the world would be Jamaican patois, which you'll probably hear if you hear any music from Jamaica. And that's not just English, that's patois. It's a mixture of grammar and certain words from African languages as well as English. And there's other languages as well, like Haitian Creole, which takes on similar qualities as well from African languages as well as French. So the theory with AAVE and the Creole theory is that it was a mixture of, again, African languages and English during the time of slavery in the United States. The more widely accepted theory, though, is the theory involving British English, so that dialects of older British English were spoken by indentured servants alongside slaves who would learn that variety of English, and then remnants of those varieties of English are carried on into today. A linguist with a PhD from Stanford, John McWhorter, in one of his works, he talks about a school that decided to try and teach African American, like black people who spoke African American vernacular English, standard English as a separate language. They wanted to teach it in a way like it was a foreign language. And that kind of led me to think about what is really the difference between these two dialects. I want to take a look at this firstly from a purely linguistic standpoint, with pronunciations, vocabulary, and grammar. To my left, you can see all of the different branches of linguistics. Firstly, I want to go over some examples. There's many sound shifts that occur, and these are all systematic. Many people, when they hear of Black English, they believe it's a series of mistakes, a series of problems with their grammar, problems with their pronunciation. It's actually very systematic in the way that words are changed. I have these examples up on screen. In Standard American English, they'd be pronounced floor, brother, runner, west, bath, with, and nothing. Keep in mind how I'm breaking up the syllables and pronouncing every single sound fully. In African American vernacular English, these would usually be pronounced as flow, brother, runner, west, bath, with, and nothing. The way that these are pronounced, you can clearly tell that the endings of many of these words are cut short. Words like brother and runner that end in an ER typically end in an A. This applies with pretty much any other word. Words like west with a consonant cluster at the very end just end in west, no T. With, the TH becomes a T. Nothing, the ING at the end just becomes an N. Next, I want to talk about vocabulary. Many vocabulary words from AAVE are taken out of context and used improperly. Here are some examples that you may have heard, like to flex, like flexing one's money, to beef, especially with someone. Low key and high key, turn, lit, finna, chow, and bay are all examples of African American vernacular English. These obviously stem from the Black community, but get used outside of the Black community very often. Another source of where these come from is the ballroom community and the drag scene, largely from the 80s and 90s in several places around the United States, including Atlanta, LA, New York, but a large mixture of different people from all over the world, queer people from all over the world in these big cities would make their own vocabulary for certain things, or take on other words and give them new meanings. Some common examples that you've probably heard would be things like slay, work, to throw shade, reading, especially of someone, and snatched. These words, again, are from the queer communities, especially the Black queer community and Latino queer community in these different cities. Nextly, I want to talk about grammar. There, again, is a consistent and internal grammar found within AAVE. Firstly, we have the omission of to be. Next, conjugations, double negatives, and the habitual be. I have a large amount of examples up on the screen, but you can see how different the standard American English phrases would be versus the AAVE phrases. For example, she is happy would normally be shortened to she's happy in casual speech, and in AAVE it's she happy. There's no is. This also works with locations. She is at the store would just become she at the stove. Next we have conjugation, which large amounts of words which have to be conjugated for person, number, and gender, which you probably learned in your English classes, like we, were, I am, those types of things, normally get flattened. So all of them will just take on one single conjugation. So we weren't there would become we wasn't there. Another thing is double negatives. Double negatives are pretty common, and a lot of people get told in school, don't use double negatives. I was taught that from a young age, especially the word ain't. That word is used a lot where I'm from. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I used to say it all the time, until going to school and being told that it was improper and wrong to use in educational contexts. For the example I have up on the board, he ain't never seen no football game, that would mean this person has never seen a football game. In standard American English, that would imply that he has seen a football game because two negatives cancel each other out. It's actually interesting because double negatives are pretty common cross-linguistically, but in standard American English, they're not a part of the language. And lastly, we have the habitual be. I have the example sentence, they always be so mad, because I think it's important to note that since people think AAVE is broken, there's actually an entire aspect of grammar that doesn't even exist in plain standard American English. This be implies that this person does this, again, habitually. This is something that they do all the time. But when you say, they always be so mad, they don't even have to be mad in the time you're saying the sentence. It's implied that it will happen in the future and it's happened in the past. Next, I want to talk about the stigmatization of Black English in the United States. So why? Why is there such a stigma against the way I and so many other people speak in this country? Obviously, the first factor is race and historical context. Again, slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, all of those things play large factors into why AAVE is so stigmatized. This is the language of Black people in this country with several systems against us. Next, we have the modern racism and classism fighting against us. Of course, racism has a strong hold in America and all of its forms because this nation was largely founded on racism as much as we try to hide it. There's also a large amount of classism that's at play. When you take the SAT, when you're reading the grammar section and the reading section, it's in standard American English, it's non-AAVE. As someone who had to go to school and learn a language separate from what I spoke at home, it was obviously a lot more difficult than someone who would normally speak AAVE, or speak standard American English. Standard American English is based on the types of English that normally the white and upper class or middle class Americans speak. So I think this high school is a great representation of that. Many people here are affluent, of course not all, and many are white, again, of course not all. but the majority, I would say, of people here speak very close, if not exactly standard American English every day, whether at school or outside of school. So where is this stigma happening? Again, educational institutions. Places like this school, places like colleges, they all fight against African American vernacular English. If I were to have submitted a test and I wrote the way that I usually talk on the test, I would get points taken off. Of course, as well, in the workplace, there's a lot of stigma against the way I would speak. In the workplace, you're taught to speak professionally, to speak kindly to customers and to clients. If you're found speaking AAVE, it's often deemed improper, inappropriate, or rude in many cases. What are the Black views of AAVE as well as standard American English? Firstly, I think a large sentiment among the Black population is that speaking standard English makes you sound white. And that's something I've been taught or told by my family members a lot is, why do you talk white? You talk white, things like that. And of course, there is kind of the idea of like the separation between Black and white communities that, again, has historically existed in this country, and that kind of plays in a modern role in the way we hear it. Another issue is code switching. This is something that I do a lot, and I think a lot of people in this room as well might do. Code switching is when you change between a language or dialect in certain situations. If anyone has heard of Spanglish before, like speaking Spanglish, you speak Spanish and English, sometimes at the same time or mixed together. Often it can just be sentences, words or phrases, vocabulary, different ways words are formed can all shape how one code switches. The reason code switching is important is because, again, in many educational institutions, people have to code switch, or they feel the need to. A quote from the Pew Research Center says, among Black adults, 48% of those with at least a 4-year college degree said they often or sometimes feel the need to code switch, compared to those who do not have a college degree, which was 37%. So as you can see, being in places of education, especially higher education, people feel the need to talk and speak in standard American English because their way of talking is not represented and is stigmatized. Lastly, I want to talk about cultural appropriation. This is a big term that I'm sure many of you have heard recently. So what is it? Let's start there. Cultural appropriation is defined up on the board with the Oxford Dictionary's definition. But I believe the real aspects that need to be paid attention to with cultural appropriation are its intentions. Is this malicious, or is this out of ignorance? That's a big issue that many people discuss in forms of cultural appropriation. In an article by Kara McAndrew called Why Non-Black Creators Need to Stop Using AAVE on Social Media, she kind of describes this a little bit more, talking about the factor of social media in cultural appropriation, because a lot of the time, people consume content from different types of avenues, different cultures are represented on social media in places they normally wouldn't see, and oftentimes they feel a want to kind of replicate it. And again, this can be problematic in a lot of ways. So why is it problematic? One of the main reasons, again, is race. There are systems of oppression which make it an issue. Taking something from a marginalized community can often obviously be seen as a problem. And then another issue that I want to bring up is that a lot of people take what AAVE is, take the grammar, take the vocabulary, and claim it as Gen Z slang, or as just some like fun little term. A lot of these words have a large history behind them, and being unaware of what that history is makes it an issue. I would like to leave you off with one thought. Language is not linear. There is no such thing as perfect English. There's no such thing as perfect Spanish or German or Chinese or anything. There is no set perfect way to speak, and the way everyone speaks tells a story. The way I speak tells the story of my native dialect of African American vernacular English, as well as influences from my Caribbean family. Many people's dialects are like a road. When there's a road, there's splits, there's merges, there's stops. There's so many ways language can influence itself and each other and the environment that it's in. So with that, I leave you. Make sure you understand that just because someone speaks differently does not mean that they speak incorrectly. Thank you.